The next tape is interviews I had with Sir Robert Telford, the Managing Director of the Marconi Company, at his house in Rettendon. This was an interview where we were discussing various things which he did in the Marconi Company, and also at the same time when he had discussions about Sir Christopher Cockerell, when he invented that very famous I suppose helicopter stoke ship which travelled from Southampton to the Isle of Wight. All the experiments were done in a bath owned by Sir Robert Telford by Sir Christopher Cockerell.
I should tell you who I am and what I do. My name is Ian Parkin. I'm a town planner and landscape architect by training many years ago, but over the last 20 years or so I have been working as a consultant in heritage and tourism, and so I give advice to all sorts of organisations, from towns and cities to the Forestry Commission, to local authorities, to the National Trust, to English Heritage, etc., etc. And it's very strange that the company that's bought the Marconi site, the New Road site, has as its planning director somebody who was at university with me, and that I've kept in touch with for 40 years now. In fact, we went to the World Cup final together in 1966 at Wembley, so we go right back. And he rang me one day about a month or so ago saying that the company had bought this site, and they wanted to celebrate the Marconi legacy, and they needed to understand how best they might do that. And so they've asked if I would, well, very simply, produce a heritage strategy, or a strategy for how we tell the story of Marconi, and what are the most important and significant messages we should be communicating to people, and really thinking about who is the market, who is the audience we should be talking to and presenting the stories to, and how should that be done? Where should it be done? Should it be done on the site? Should his original office become like a little museum, or do you do something more significant in Chelmsford Museum, or what? I mean, the world's your oyster in terms of the range of things you could conceivably do. So I'm now at the very beginning and starting to think about, starting to understand the story of Marconi and the significance of what he achieved, and in fact where the company has gone from Morse code to incredible communications within a century, and I've got to work out what we should be trying to do where, and I appreciate the much of the original collections have now gone to Oxford University, so we've got a limited amount of resources.
Excuse me, have you seen these? No. No. Have you seen they had an exhibition at Oxford?
Yeah, lecture when?
And I was sent a copy of the
Brochure.
which was very well done.
Yeah, very well.
Anyway, you have. That just reminded me. Sorry about that.
I think maybe that's one of the things you and I should do, actually, is to go to Oxford and so at this moment in time, Peter's arranged a day for me to do one or two things and meet some people, including having the privilege of meeting you, really. And and I'd be really interested if there was 4 things that one should be telling the world about Marconi and what was achieved. I'd be really interested to know what your no, not maybe, I can't do the Desert Island discs and give you your 10 records, but you know what I mean. It's one of the things which are so remarkable, and that are really important to present to people.
Yes, and of course this is particularly related to John.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Cool. Off the top of my head, first of all, of course, the first thing was communicating over the horizon.
Yes. Yes.
Not over the horizon, over water, which wasn't possible before.
Yeah.
There was
Yes.
no communication. And that was an absolute revolution very, very quickly, and developed and, of course, saved many lives over the years.
Yes.
And so on, because there is the story of the Titanic, as you know. And so on.
Yes.
But I mean, many others. There's some quite incredible stories from the marine side. But
I mean, what came over, Peter's shown me his little slideshow this morning, and he seems like almost weekly refining and developing things through those early years. So things seem to be happening fantastically speedily.
The next thing, I suppose, and I don't think, although it's talked about and so on and so forth, and it's still got the hut in the market in the Chelmsford.
Yes.
But I mean, the build-up of what became the British Broadcasting Corporation.
Yeah.
Not enough is really made of the Marconi's place in that, of how these aeronautical engineers started, in effect with an aeronautical transmitter for transmitting. They'd all been working on it during that World War, and of course that was vital. But that's another story of its own.
Yes.
In fact, a very big story. But the way that they in this little hut took over and did performances, particularly Eckersley himself. But then, of course, when the other people in the country were beginning to demand, and but Marconi, as you know, had set up to MT at Little and to Turrall in London, the Marconi House, as it was then. And of course, the Marconi Company, in conjunction with AEI, or it wasn't AEI then, Metropolitan Vickers and General Electric and so on and so forth, but Marconi ran it, and Marconi appointed John Reed as their general manager. That was the then managing director. Marconi's picked John Reed to do it, and of course Eckersley became the first chief engineer of the BBC, and many others moved over from Little to there. And that story of that, they're already broadcasting to London, from Marconi Station and so on. It developed from there, but I don't think, because the BBC people don't want to. No. They don't like to feel themselves a public corporation. It was then the Marconi, the British Broadcasting Company Limited.
Yes.
Largely owned by Marconi itself. So I don't think, making a great deal of that is important. I'm thinking sort of chronologically now. What next? Yes, the great thing next was the creation of shortwave transmitters which could communicate all around the world. Till then, communication was very limited to long wave. And medium wave only goes a short distance, you probably know. So, but long wave went long distances, but skips.
Yes.
it's not practical anyway. And these Marconi engineers developed with Marconi the world changed. I mean, you sent a Marconi-gram in those days.
Yes.
You know, all the communication. Prior to that, it was cable, you see, run by cable and wireless.
Right.
And so that was a real revolution, you see, but then it frightened the life out of the government because Marconi was running international communications, and people like the Australians and others complained about this because they were running it with their own nationalised services at the other end,
Correct.
with Marconi equipment, if you like. So that was a very, very important step forward. Because from it all the world, you know, normal communications came, and later became satellite, of course, and so on and so forth, in which we played a major role, Marconi played a major role. So that was tremendously important.
But shortwave, how does one describe what shortwave is?
Communications over a greater distance.
Yeah, but
You put it in
frequencies.
frequencies, can't you?
You'll get that tonight when you speak to the
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think for the man in the street who comes from Wigan and therefore will have heard of Marconi, but radio waves and frequencies and stuff don't mean anything to them. How do you...
doesn't have to necessarily talk about the short wave. But the fact was this development by Marconi company.
Yes.
And they ran the communications.
I think that's amazing.
You know, and the market was a Marconi gram.
Yes.
You sent, not a telegram or
A Marconi gram, the word Marconi written into it. You saw that in the slides.
It's interesting because another, well, maybe today people wouldn't necessarily want to use their own name, and yet his name was used from day one. And so Branson, I was trying to find a comparison, a modern day comparison, and I gave Peter Richard Branson and Bill Gates as maybe comparisons to what Marconi was. But in fact, neither of them...
Gates was very limited, actually. I mean, he's done all that tremendous, but it was only dealing with a little bit of software, you know, that really made, you know, universal and computing. Okay, coupled with, which he didn't have anything to do with PC.
Yes.
You know, before that, it was all...
Of course.
Bloody hell, we got terminals on mainframes.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah,
exactly right.
We did at Barrow, didn't we?
What?
The first computer was at Barrow. It was the enormous thing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely enormous.
Well, it was interesting what you were saying, because you were talking about the fact of the whole concept of wireless, and from it being cable to wanting it wireless, and I'm not very computer literate, but I'm being kicked by my wife and others to become, you understand me. But you see, I've just got I've been given or been asked to use a wireless computer, a wireless laptop.
Yes.
And so, get rid of the wires in the same way as radio, wireless radio, and it's exactly the same thing like 80 years on.
Yeah.
And now I have a laptop, but I have to be near some of these stations that they have where you can pick it up. But the fact is, it's exactly the same principle in another medium. It is absolutely amazing.
That's in every way.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, communications, which produced all sorts of forms. One very interesting thing, I'm not putting it forward as a major thing.
A top 10.
We developed what was called tropospheric scatter, where you could communicate over a distance of about, I forget now, a couple of hundred
200 miles?
something like that, bouncing off the troposphere. Now, this was absolutely ideal. There was no other way of communicating with the oil stations, you know.
Oh, right, yes. When you say the troposphere, are you talking about the...
12 miles up is the troposphere,
Right, okay.
and you can bounce a wireless signal off that. See, in early days, the limitation of a microwave signal was 30 miles in a straight line when you got fixed points. But you can't fix it on an oil rig, 30 miles on
Because
the
it
water,
goes very right
up and
again.
down.
Yeah.
So you bounce it off the troposphere. As Sir Robert said, 200 miles.
Nobody else did this. We were the inventors, or Marconi company were the inventors of it.
And you'll meet somebody tonight who was involved in the early tropospheric scatter equipment, a guy called Raymond Rowe.
Yes, that's right.
It's,
Anyway, that I just mentioned, because all sorts of developments, PTC has chucked out microwave now. And of course, that come in during the war. You couldn't do microwave before. You see, if you go to long wave, that was a wavelength of 1,500 meters, nearly a mile. You know, microwave was a few millimeters still.
Yeah.
But the higher the frequency, the more specific was the distance.
Correct.
when you say that, I mean, who...
You see, just digressing, the Marconi Research Labs during the war became the government, called Peace and Communicate. Anyway, it was the people dealing with the mathematics and so on and so forth of signals, because of course it started to develop during the war for radar, these very short wave devices called magnetrons and klystrons and so on and so forth.
Which is the driving valve, if you like, in the equipment.
You just see, that's the trouble, you get me talking. Anyway,
It's lovely to
just
hear you
mentioned that because there was a whole, raft of things right up to satellite communications, in which we made the first ground stations for the post office of Doonhilly and elsewhere for cable and wireless around the world with a big supply.
You know where Doonhilly is, near Poland?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Satellite ground
I was
stations.
thinking, as you were
But
talking...
these are all, continuing variations. We had people who were the top experts in the world on communications. It was another Eckersley, Peter Eckersley.
Peter Eckersley.
Peter Eckersley, who in his last years couldn't talk. I've forgotten what he got, but he was the most brilliant man probably in the world on mathematics and developing communications. In fact, Churchill sent for him during the war because there was an argument about some particular new weapon that was being, counter weapon that was being produced airborne, as to whether it would operate.
Yes.
And Peter Eckersley was called to give his opinion on it. This is all new stuff, you see. I think Churchill actually believed the RAF bloke, not Eckersley at the time, in typical Churchill fashion. I've heard the story told with those long since dead of an 18th Marshal I knew very well, who told the story at wartime because he was called up. He was working on it. Anyway, let's jump, because I'm beginning to fade a bit.
I think you're doing wonderfully.
I think the next important thing, as far as the Marconi company was concerned, is radar. You see, Marconi himself had forecast what you could do with the radio waves to determine where things were up there. But this was about the time of the shortwave thing being developed around the world, and his whole eye was on that. that great thing. It broke his heart, incidentally, when, having produced it, the government bloody well nationalised it, the cable and wireless.
Yeah, that's what he said.
But that's what broke Marconi's heart, and then he went home back to Italy and never said.
He did distinguish.
Anyway,
blind vision, he thought, didn't he?
Yeah.
Radar.
Yeah. But we got involved quite a bit during the war with radar, because again, Telecommunications Research Unit, I think that was called.
Yes.
I think that's right.
Yes, that's right.
But the company was involved in all sorts of ways during the war on radar development, chiefly naval. And then it set up one of its chaps who came back from the forces, a certain Colonel Telford, was a real prophet about this, and persuaded the company to set up a division to operate in this field. And in less than no time we were given the huge contract of re-equipping the whole of the UK, which had slipped downhill after, once there was victory, nobody did a bloody thing. It was all gone. The whole fixed stations and hundreds of big mobile stations bust. The rotary it was called. I became, in effect, the word wasn't known in those days, project manager for it. Because you've got the manufacturing side, you've got the research side, you've got the development engineering side, and you've got the commercial side.
Yes.
And you have to pull it all together. And I happen to be a sort of free chap at the moment. I've just come back up from working overseas for some years, and I was sort of put in unofficial charge. Nobody ever said I was, but I was. I ran the thing with this was top government level, marvellous Air Vice Marshal Sir Walter Pretty. Oh, what a boy. He'd been chief signal officer to the RAF during the war. Got lots of stories, marvellous head. Anyway, that's by the by. And we developed this and created a radar division, and later a radar company, which was a leader in the world, particularly not only in the radar itself, but the data handling of the results, which was a computerized thing. It so happened that at Great Baddow they developed, the research people, some of the earliest chip, I'd call it.
Yeah.
Then, and to illustrate it, they designed a little computer called the Million.
Yes, that's right.
Which was a small thing, was what he called a real-time computer. In fact, they showed it as a show, running a complete model railway. Real-time thing. If a train was coming there, another one couldn't come, and so on and so forth. And this was used, this development we used for big data handling schemes. This became the enormous side of radar. We did the whole Swedish defence system. What's the system called? Backfall?
Oh, I don't remember. I wasn't involved in it. Sorry.
Oh, they were huge, in effect, computer that built up of thousands of individual transistors in those days. In fact, just joking, I've never forgotten it. I mean, this was a research project for which we had to quote a big fixed price, and it obviously was going right off the ceiling. And I remember the then Chief of Research, later Sir Eric Eastwood, came to see me and said he'd had an offer from Philips, I think, if he bought the whole quantity of transistors, which was a huge number, 100,000, whatever it was needed, they'd reduce the price to that. But this was a huge amount of money, because it didn't give transistors away in those days, let me tell you. And he wanted to order the lot. He hadn't got the authority. And I had, and I said no, we couldn't afford it. We couldn't put that sum of money up for the next 3 or 4 years. The price over the next 3 or 4 years dropped to about a 50th of what it was then, and we actually made money on the bloody job. Due to an accidental.
Well done.
But Eric was, you know, a tough guy, and
He was a tough
he
guy.
was furious with me. No, he'd arranged this, and so I'm sorry, you cannot do
Very
it.
good decision of yours.
What?
A good decision of yours.
Well, it was just based on
Ability to do
necessity.
That's what managing directors are for.
Oh dear, yeah.
So when did you join the company then?
When did I join? 38.
Did you? Wow. So were you in the company during the Second World War?
Yes.
And were you then sort of seconded into the government operation at that stage?
Well, no, I was working. I was supposed to. I was then going to the Air Force, which you know I applied for and so on, but the company stopped it because by then I got engaged on doing an airborne project. The complete communication equipment for all the bombers of any kind, where the receiver was designed by Christopher Cockrell, a very close friend of mine.
Oh, really? Was he?
Sir Christopher, yeah.
Oh,
But that's another story in itself, too.
He used to work here. Mr. Christopher used to work here for Mark Dennis, didn't he?
Oh, yes, he was my colleague. He was a colleague. We were colleagues during the war.
well, strangely enough, I had I did a museum project for a Hovercraft Museum Trust, who obviously knew that the leading people had actually involved Christopher Cockrell in various aspects of
Well, he
the
was
museum.
he was the
He was the inventor, yeah.
He was a complete inventor.
Yeah.
You know, he never made any money out of it at all.
No.
In fact, again, you see, I was connected with it. He left the company to build boats, because he reckoned he could build boats on the Broads, which would be smaller and more economical, but more convenient for everybody in them. And so on, you know, applying a bit of caravan
Yes.
technology to the ships, but he was an expert on boats too, and he did, and this led to him developing what he called blowing bubbles over the hull of the ship, which would, you know, decrease the friction, so he'd save this. And then he said, "What the bloody hell, why have it in the water at all?"
Yes,
He came to see me one night, and in typical sense, I wasn't expecting him. I lived at World's End Cottage, right down the little barrow.
I know, yeah.
Knock at the door. In comes Christopher and says, "Read that." And it was a mathematical treatise on, you know, this hover effect.
Yeah.
And I said, "God, your maths is better than mine." He read maths at Cambridge, and so he said, "Well, have a look at this." And produced his little tin can thing.
Did he produce his model?
His model. But as it happened, I couldn't use it because it needed plugging into the mains.
Oh,
That's why I hadn't got mains, so electricity. I had a local little generator.
Oh, yeah.
Different. Anyway, so I said, "But why hadn't Rolls-Royce? They were doing this, you know, vertical takeoff." They said, "Why haven't they seen this?" And he said, "Because they weren't looking for it. They're looking for lift, not for hover."
I think what you're saying to me is that in some way Marconi not only had the vision, but he got a phenomenal range of unbelievably talented people around him who were just pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely right. Round and Eckersley. I don't know, I don't think about 200 world patents to their names. They were just constantly developing things. But there were masses of them.
Yeah, Captain H.J. Round was ex-Royal Navy and had his own laboratory in London.
Anyway, that was
But you had what, McCarthy?
What?
McCarthy?
Yeah, well, McCarthy, of course, was one of the original little developers who came back to the company later.
But these were all sort of MA, PhD type people. I mean, they were very academically, technically sound, but they had the ability to invent and create.
Most of the research workers in Bedder were physicists.
Right.
Physicists and mathematicians. You know, they had to be. I mean, the engineering followed later after the physics. And as always, even to this day, what we call the aerial section, which is the transmission thing. I mean, when ITV was set up, we were a supplier of the stations everywhere. They employed the company, the Bedder people, to determine from the end the construction of the aerial in such a way that it met the best needs of how the population lay geographically. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, we had a contract for that, so the coverage of the whole of the ITV network was done and worked out by Marconi. That's what Robert's just saying.
Each being different because the population spread. So you've got to gear your power and the aerial design to go in to create the right sort of pattern.
So all the big aerials that were dotted around the country were all designed, patternized by Marconi.
And then, as you say, Marconi himself started with this. Well, it was a research and engineering company.
Yeah.
It never made any money in those days, God knows. They had to raise money by giving patents to overseas companies and so on. You know. Set up companies all around the world, Amalgamated Wireless, Australasia, Radio Swiss,
Canadian Marconi Company,
Canadian Marconi, you name it.
RCA?
Yes, RCA was the first radio corporation in America, was Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company of America. That was so. Anyway, that's all about it.
No, it is.
But it then carried on. We were fortunate in a way. Bedder were given a contract whenever the country was going to do the first major radio-controlled missile, big missile. It was actually scrubbed in the end when we went American, as you probably know, as we did at that time for aircraft and God knows what. But to do this job, we had to add to the staff of Bedder, and we recruited some the brightest people out of university, because at that time they would have to go do national service a couple of years. But if they came on this job, they avoided that, it was cancelled. So we got, you can imagine.
And this is the mid to late 50s then? Because the national service finished in 1956.
Yes, not too long after the war, probably, because I was back in 1950, yes, the 50s. That's through to early 60s, I can't remember dates. And then when the job was cancelled, here we got these, well, I don't know, 25 highly paid PhDs, what have you. And really the company should have said sorry mate, you know. But they didn't, they kept them on and we used them for developing new radar. And it paid off in the end, but by God, what a gamble that was. It was the biggest gamble of all time.
I was going to ask you, where did Decca fit into this whole, to the radar sort of?
Oh, Decca, Ned Fennessy, the great friend of mine, is still alive. So it was, Ned set up to do a bit of marine radar, really. He'd been and John Decca. He'd worked on radar. It was Air Commodore, I think, Ned Fennessy, yeah, during the war. But they were only in a very, very limited field. They didn't do the big radars at all. It was very, very limited. But later, having started, they began to develop them. Tessie took them over and they developed more.
I
And it created competition. There was no competition for years, you see.
my sister married a guy who was installing radar systems in places like Dover, in the port of Dover and Tilbury and places.
That's right, they were to do with the marine
Yeah.
side, you see.
I think he worked in Holland as well, and Rotterdam.
Oh yeah, they did. I mean, Ben Fennessy was a great guy, did a marvellous job. Later became managing director of the BT, didn't he, at the post office.
Oh really? Really?
You're alright, Sir Robert?
Yeah, so not to pick up.
Yes, right.
Sorry.
But I think, well, just let me cast my view, because you last time just probably confused the life out of you.
You haven't at all, in any way, shape or form.
But all the time it's people, good, top people. You know, I think when, as you know, some stupid buggers just wrecked the company and threw it away. But I don't want to talk about that, otherwise I get
That hurts. You get very
Yeah,
upset
very,
about
very
that,
angry.
yes.
But before that, they were beginning to, after I retired, people were cutting the overheads, cutting the R&D and so on. There was no way the company existed by choosing the right product and doing it well. I mean, we were lucky for years. We got into one blasted thing after another. Of course, by then, we'd taken over the whole of the Elliott Brothers, Elliott Automation, and the GEC Electronics, and the AI Electronics, and so on, and formed this GEC-Marconi, of which I was the boss man, and I created the four companies: Marconi Avionics, Marconi Communications, Marconi Radar, and Marconi what we call Space and Defence, which was very high up in the ladder around the world. Space and Defence, they did the first satellite, the satellite itself, communications satellite for the country. I had one lovely story after another. I went to the launch of this satellite at Cape Canaveral. What was it called?
It was
Kennedy and Canaveral.
Yeah.
With the 100th Thor Delta. So it was the big rocket on the launch. So Lockheed, yes it was Lockheed, wasn't it, who made the Thor Delta, that's right, had their top people there too. And the Ministry of Defence had their top people, and I was over there, and we watched the launch, and then they lost it. The satellite disappeared. Extraordinary business. Of course, everybody was fed up. There was a rapid meeting called by the project manager, and they said, we can't do any more tonight. It's obviously gone. We don't know where the hell it is, this satellite. And we'll convene at 10 o'clock the next morning. We'll have it sorted. And by God, they had it sorted too. What has happened? You know, when the third stage of
Yes.
when they turn it into the right orbit.
All right.
And a transistor had failed, and there was no spare transistor, which is another story in itself. But the fail-safe position was the rocket propellant thing swiveling at right angles to the satellite. So what it did, it shot it off in the most enormous, it was going around the world like this.
Oh, yes.
Only about 30,000 feet high, I think it was, at its low level over the country, but hundreds of miles out that way. So and of course it didn't last very long, burnt out, it was in the Earth's atmosphere, But it was what they called the McNamara era, where they're saving money. They're just a multi-million rocket with no standby
There's backup.
backup. You know. McNamara total package acquisition. I'll never forget it. TPA. Anyway, there we are.
You've been very kind to us.
I think we are.
Why don't we try and I'm going to be doing some work over the next 2 months, so maybe we should try and have another few minutes with you on another occasion to keep
See if I can, yeah.
because that's just brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking.
Thank you, Sir Robert.
Okay.
And I hope we do feel a bit better. We know you've had a tough old time.
I shall
You'll be asleep soon.
still, why should I complain? I play a game of cribbage, if that means anything to you.
Yes.
With an old lady of 99 years, and now she's having us 10 months, or 9 months old. I've already got my invitation to her 100th party, and she whacks the pants. She's so bright. She's extraordinary, living all on her own, has for, I think, 40 years now since her husband died.
Really?
Yeah, he died comparatively young.
Is this locally?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
No doubt.
But do you still
Lovely
go?
old lady. I go on a Thursday afternoon. I'm due to go today. I don't know whether I should be able to go now. You're too tired.
Does Lady Betty still play bridge?
Yeah,
She does,
yeah. Yeah, she takes this old lady on a Wednesday afternoon to the oldies bridge, you know. It's not very bright level, and Betty plays herself with another top girl, and of course they're always top.
Yeah, of course they are.
But there you go, for the company and so on.
Yes,
Off she goes. I couldn't do it all afternoon at the bridge.
Thanks ever so much, Sir Robert. That's very kind of you.
Quite a party, that is,
Yeah.
100th birthday.
Isn't it just? Absolutely right.